name is Pia Hansson from Vyrsodepseio in Uddevalla. It's a regional museum with a contemporary art hall, and it's been really inspiring to hear you all. And I want to believe that art and now I'm not saying audience, but citizens, sorry, would be strengthened to live in such conditions, for example, in Greece. Do you feel that you really make a difference, and do you reach out to more than the usual citizen, cultural citizen? Do you understand my question?
If we feel that we make a difference?
Yeah, that you feel that in a very difficult situation, and there is all over Europe, but in your, for example, the conditions in Greece, right. Do you feel that people really are strengthened, that you make a difference with your art?
I think, well, I'm not speaking about my work. I will talk about things that are happening around me, just to avoid the usual narcissism that I'll make a difference. Absolutely, I think that I have actually witnessed what it means to make art in difficult times. That can actually empower people, and the audience was not coming to have a good time, but to get the right answers and to move on. And so it was more like a resistance space. Kind of depending on the phases of the Greek crisis, because we've been through a lot of phases. In 2011 and 12, for example, that the Greek society kind of imagined that the citizens could reshape their lives in general. I think that period was a period of a very strong resistance, and people were coming and exchanging ideas. It was like exchanging survival code. It was like a beehive of exchange, rather than transmission of knowledge one way. It was both ways, I'd say. And the need was the same need to share knowledge of survival.
It's interesting when we've had this conversation about trying to find relevance, trying to be relevant, or actually this urgency. It makes it sound like a very luxurious position where we're seeking for relevance, where there's an urgency for people to come and find a space to be the cultural experience is creating a place of resistance. Kind of thing. Interesting. Any other questions? And would anybody else like to respond to that question, actually? I don't know.
That's Ingrid.
Good. It's coming. Do you want to shout?
There you go. Ingrid Handeland from Audiences Norway, working with audience development, by the way, and to increase both engagement but also consuming of the arts. So my question is to you, Elli. Why do you need to use the phrase dull consumers, audiences as dull consumers, when they actually use their free time, their earned money to buy a ticket? Why do we need to talk down on people who actually buy tickets when you yourself are saying that arts in Greece these days are supported by ticket buyers?
Yes, I guess my point, but of course I cannot go, I have a time frame, so I guess that's why it came so loud. But my point is not referring to buying tickets, of course, because this is a way to support arts. But my point is to actually go more into to discover, rather than led through channels. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. To discover rather than go through the usual channels, like I think that it's very important when when someone from the audience is discovering this idea of discovering something that is hidden within a hidden city, that there are so many things that you can actually unveil by making art. I think this idea is dominant. We must go back to it. So it can be dull if you're kind of being told where to go, what is in, what is out, what's fashionable, it can become a very dull thing in that sense. Do you see what I mean?
I think you just wanted to discuss over fika. It's coming any minute now. But Chris, you were going to respond to that as well. Yeah.
Let me respond from a different direction. Yeah. I'm old enough to think that probably when I was younger, I lived in, we had a capitalist society. So it was a mechanism by which we transferred goods and wealth between us. I've seen that change from having a capitalist society to being one, where every human transaction and interaction has become a transaction. So we've now got to the point where I remember in the 80s, I was running an education department for a big theatre. Our job was to help educate children. And then it became to prepare children to become the next generation of consumers at the theatre. So every action that we now enter into is defined by a market economic model, and I think that's probably what you're suggesting. Like you, and this is the utopian, I would say, yes, let's use capitalist thinking and structures, but let's be very conscious of the linguistic implications of that. End user is somebody who uses the car after it's been built. It is.
So I like it. There's a question. I'm going to go for, I'm not looking at Hendrik. I'm breaking the rules. All you nervous Swedes who've noticed I've gone 1 second over. Anyway, one more question, please.
Okay, I'll keep it short. Marianne Söderholm, Region Västra Götaland. A lot of people have talked about signs in society today of nationalism, scary things happening on a large scale, tendencies that we are quite scared of. Trauma, in fact. And I'm thinking, is it going to take 70 years for us to see citizens come together like in Wroclaw after such a trauma? Or do you see it happening already today on a larger scale?
Yes. Can I
answer? Of course, please.
Well, because this is okay. Because the word trauma, I'm very much touched. I'm very much interested as collective traumas. We've been collectively through a traumatic period in Greece, and I think to some extent, European citizens are going through a collective traumatic experience now. Because of the crisis, the financial crisis that is spilling all over Greece, all over Europe, and is creating a fear that seems to be presented as a dominant state and not as something to challenge. And I think it's very important. This is where I find the strength of art, that it can be used as a tool to overcome this notion that there is no light at the end of the tunnel. No, this is a great opportunity. It's a great challenge. We are being challenged to think of the crisis and of catastrophe. Crisis means judgment, by the way, in Greece, in Greek. It means a shifting turning point to judge yourself and the others, to reflect upon. So it's a way to reflect. And I think, for example, in modernity, humanity was being faced with equal problems, but we kind of moved into it, challenging each other in all fields, philosophy, arts. Did I answer? I don't know.
Well, I think it was an open question with an interesting open answer. Would anyone else like to have a quick last word on that? Chris, Birgitta?
It's very difficult when you're in the transition to see what's happening, and that's what I am experiencing now. So there are what we've also heard a lot of examples today and yesterday of really interesting ways of managing this, and that at the same time we are up against quite some challenges. And I do believe that we can't just stay within our own sector. what we heard from the Hartboven Hart, sorry for my Dutch, is really to work across sectors, maybe reduce our suspicions and prejudice about the private companies. I think there are alliances to be made.
So we're listening for the voices in the fog. Yes. That's how.
Try to clear the mist.
Clear the mist. That's it. Go clear the mist over some coffee. Thank you all very much, panel. Thank you.